All right.
Sarah said you were coming. She was stuck in a meeting. And anyways, okay, I'm sorry. All right. Are we ready then?
We are ready if you are.
Bring everybody in.
We are? Okay, we're good. Just a second.
Okay, Jana, are we all set?
Yes, everybody is in.
I see 1, I see 2, I see 3, 4, 5, 6. I see Rachel. We need to make sure we're all unmuted. Do not see Mr. Kozik.
Is
There
Bert
we
in?
go.
Bert was in. I saw his name.
There he is now in.
All right, and I'm going through and unmuting everybody.
Well, while you are doing that, let me call to order this meeting, this regular meeting of the Planning Board for the City of Birmingham. Veterans Day, Wednesday, November 11th, 2020. Can we please call the roll?
Klein.
Could you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Scott Klein.
Yes, present.
Robin Boyle.
Here.
Stuart Jeffries.
Here.
Bert Kosek. Daniel
Here from Birmingham, Michigan. Again.
Right. Has everyone been in Birmingham, Michigan so far? Who said yes? Scott,
Yes, I have.
Robin,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Stuart.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Daniel Scher.
Here, Birmingham.
Brian Williams.
Present. Live in Birmingham.
Janelle Boyce.
Here in Birmingham, Michigan.
Jason Emron.
Here in Birmingham, Michigan.
Nassim Ramen.
Here in Birmingham, Michigan.
Rachel Hester.
Here in Birmingham, Michigan.
June Lee. All right. We're all set.
Excellent. We are core and full. So let us move along to a review and approval of the minutes of the regular meeting from October 28th. Do we have any comments or corrections? Mr. Scher.
One comment in the initial motion regarding the postponement. I think for clarity, although it's essentially it would be nice to add without date, that the adjournment or the postponement was without date.
Any other comments or corrections?
We will have to check the wording of the motion to see if in fact that was the verbiage that was included in the motion or not.
Actually, the verbiage was sine die, which is Latin for without date, and I said that's without date.
So Laura, perhaps you can check and make sure that was the case, and if so, then we'll make the correction.
I do know he said something in Latin and he said, as we say in the legal profession, and then continued on. So that sounds correct.
Okay. So add without date to the end of the motion. Okay.
I tell you, Mr. Scher. Doesn't work.
Well,
Any other comments or corrections?
Yeah, it sounds like a nunc pro tunc to me.
All right. Seeing no other corrections, do I have a motion to approve as duly noted here this evening?
so moved.
I see a motion by Mr. Scher. Is that a second by Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Second by Mr. Williams. Thank you very much. Is there any conversation on the motion? Seeing none, would you please call the roll?
Daniel Scher.
Yes.
Brian Williams.
Yes.
Janelle Boyce.
Yes.
Robin Boyle.
Yes.
Scott Klein.
Yes.
Stuart Jeffries.
Yes.
Bert Kosek.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you. So we come to chairperson's comments. I do have a few tonight that I'd like you to indulge me quickly. First and foremost, a very sincere thank you to all of our veterans for all of your service throughout the years in protecting our way of life and allowing us to do what we're doing here this evening. So thank you very much. Secondly, I'd like to talk a little bit about tonight's purpose. We're back again tonight to talk about have a detailed discussion about the first draft of our master plan. And our last meeting was canceled related to this topic due to some, call them regulatory machinations. I think it's therefore pretty appropriate to quickly reset the table for perhaps not the board, but for the public. Specifically, I'd like to do so related to what we are reviewing, the process we're taking, and kind of how we got to where we are quickly. My hope in doing this is that this might clear up frankly, some misinformation that is making the rounds on social media, if you could believe that could ever occur. The city of Birmingham is required to have a master plan by legislation, and we're required to update that at regular intervals. We are in the midst of that process right now. We hired a consulting team who will help us lead this process. Matt Lambert from the DPZ team is with us tonight. They're going to present a portion of that plan, of that draft, I should say, the next chapter, so to speak. But there are a few really exceptionally important points that I'd like everybody in the public in particular, whether you're going to participate tonight or just watching, to please keep in mind. Number one, this is a first draft, and that is exactly what it is, a draft. It has been prepared by our consultant team. It is not something that is currently proposed by the city of Birmingham, proposed by members of this board. It is a draft plan that represents our expert consultants' recommendation based on national best practices. To be blunt, it might contain recommendations that have not been fully vetted by this board. And in fact, some of them may not live on past draft one. Indeed, our purpose being here tonight is to review draft one to move this process forward. Secondly, I think it's also very important to understand that this first draft was prepared by our consultant team after extensive research into the community and significant public outreach. Online engagement through surveys, numerous public meetings and interviews, all day long charrettes. I can tell you that, in my opinion, having been in this business for over 25 years, it's arguably the most extensive public engagement I've ever seen for a community doing something along these lines. Secondly, let's get into the meat of what we're doing. This draft exists, and we are breaking it down because it is sizable, and I'm looking at you, Mr. Lambert. We're breaking it down into smaller chunks, into chapters, as I'll call them, to help allow for easier digestion of the ideas, but also to allow for more verbose and robust discussion. The feedback we give the consultant over the course of these 5 or 6 meetings, if I'm not mistaken, Jana, is going to help them change this draft so that the second draft coming back to us is far more in line with what we as a community are comfortable with. Tonight in particular, we are really only discussing Haynes Square, South Woodward Gateway, as well, which is Woodward between 14 Mile and Lincoln, essentially, and the rail district. And I'm going to ask the public, when I give you an opportunity to speak, if you could please indulge me and try and maintain focus of your comments on these sections so that we can properly note your comments in the proper place, in the proper point of the record, and keep our discussions moving forward. I will tell you that our next meetings, which will be in early 2021, will focus specifically on the neighborhoods. And again, we'll have ample opportunity for the public to provide comments. Where do we go from here? When we finish our first pass over this draft, which again will take place sometime in early 2021, the consultant is going to modify the document and later on that year provide us a draft 2. As I said, there are going to be a whole nother series of public meetings where you, the public, as well as this board, will have an opportunity to weigh in and refine draft 2 even further before it's discussed and even put forth toward the city commission for final adoption. Lastly, I think it's important to understand what a master plan is, and I apologize, board, if I'm going on a little too long, but it's clear from some of the notes I've seen on the internet that it is not that clear to some of our residents. A master plan is really a framework for our land use in this city. Nothing that is in this master plan, even if it were to be adopted, would change a single ordinance. It would be the framework, the guideposts by which the community then looks at its ordinances and decides what shall we change and how shall we change. So even if a plan is adopted, it does not change one bit of zoning at its adoption. So tonight is a study session. We are not going to be voting on anything. We're not taking action on the plan. What you will hear is first a very brief introduction by our consultant about the sections I mentioned: Haynes Square, Rail District, and South Woodward Gateway. I'm then going to open it up to approximately 30 minutes or so, give or take, depending on the volume of input, to the public. When I call for public opinion, what I would ask you to do is use the raise your hand function. The center console, I have my participant window up. I will call out your name in best I can in the order in which I see it. When I call your name and you are unmuted, please give me your name and your place of residence for the record, and then provide your comments. That's a big chunk of the reason we're here tonight, is to hear from the public, if at all possible. I would ask, however, that in order to ensure courtesy to your fellow residents, that you try and keep your comments succinct, to the point, and try not to repeat others too much if at all possible. We want to make sure everybody has an opportunity to speak in the short time we have allotted tonight. At that point, I'm going to bring it back to the board. We will have more discussions, provide the consultant with a little bit more direction as to where we head moving forward. So I apologize for perhaps being a bit long-winded, but I think it was important to reset the stage as to what we're doing. And with that, Jana, I don't think there's anything really else to review on this agenda, is there?
There is not.
Excellent. So let's dive right in. Jana, do you want to take the lead and introduce our consultant team? Or?
Sure, I can introduce him. Mr. Matt Lambert is here from DPZ Planning. They're the main firm that was hired to do the master plan update for Birmingham. They have several sub-consultants as well. I think most everybody's familiar with them. Matt, I will turn it over to you. I did make you a co-host, so you can share your screen if you would like to do so for the presentation.
Perfect. Thanks, Jenna.
You're welcome.
Before I put that up, I did want to note one thing that was in the transmittal, which was a recommendation on our end, given the breakdown of review meetings, that we add yet an additional one, but add a meeting to have 2 meetings for focus on the neighborhood. You know, given feedback so far, I think it would be helpful to be able to give enough time to sort of the mapping issues separate from those issues that may be more need more discussion. So I think that we'd like to add that. So with that, luckily there's not so many slides today. Hopefully that'll go quick. So the mixed use districts. The first thing I wanted to share is a slide that we've reviewed before, just as a reminder of what we mean by Haynes Square. So we talked about this in the last meeting, which was a recommendation early in the plan to differentiate the mixed-use districts that assemble into the downtown into districts in a slightly different manner in order to bridge the divide on Big Woodward, and also to recognize the difference that the character of the areas have, where we discussed previously Market North, that clearly has a different character, and the extension that Maple and Woodward, the core of downtown, has currently been moving across Big Woodward with recent developments. So that is sort of a basis for getting into Haynes Square, which comprises the southern portion of the Triangle District and South Old Woodward. So just as a reminder, that's part of where we come up with this name for Haynes Square. So as with other districts, this is a land use map that it's a zoom in, and it overlays the future land use with the multimodal transportation recommendations with a few modifications. Presently, the map reflects mostly existing recommendations, most of those in the multimodal plan, as well as the area being a mixed-use district, which is already the sort of plan in the future land use. Since Scott brought it up, one of the things that is core, really the primary core element of a master plan is the future land use, to set direction for how land is used in the future. In Haynes Square, this recommendation is mixed use as is followed to date. So some other minor modifications here are bike lane along Lincoln, which we had debated for a little while, but it seemed to be quite important by the time that we started this, and we found even more that it's a strong need. But we've made other recommendations that we'll review in the area in order to fix dangerous streets and intersections, including what I consider to be one of the worst intersections anywhere, which is that northbound left turn from Big Woodward onto Old Woodward. Kind of insane. The Lincoln and Woodward intersections, Lincoln and Adams, Adams and Woodward, the whole area really is a mess. It's danger for drivers, for pedestrians, for cyclists. Unfortunately, we've been reminded by this recently in reality. So, but we also look at this as a major opportunity. There's an opportunity through a few modifications to existing streets and spaces in public ownership. We'll discuss the square, but before discussing it, it's important to point out the little jog. This graphic may have not been noticed well in your review of the report. I discussed that it's quite long, but you'll notice that we jog Adams when it meets Haynes. This is recommended so that the traffic along Adams, particularly the southbound traffic, be diverted onto Haynes at that point, so it intersects with Woodward nearly at a perpendicular in a location that we recommend have a traffic signal. This achieves a few key objectives to eliminate the dangerous Adams and Woodward intersection. You know, I've walked that many times as a pedestrian, and you really don't expect the cars to stop on that free right-hand turn northbound onto Adams. To reduce traffic at the Woodward, Lincoln, and Adams intersection, which is a particular problem for all roadway users. I mean, it really backs up in all directions there. But also to bring customers into the future mixed-use district, what's the rail district now, along Haynes, who otherwise would simply drive past quickly along Adams. Businesses, you know, this is aimed to be a mixed-use district. We feel that it has great potential to actually absorb quite a lot of residential uses, and perhaps the mixed uses are most important along Haynes and not everywhere in the district. But as a mixed-use area, you need to have traffic moving through it to support the businesses. So this is a means of encouraging support of businesses along Haynes, as well as fixing all the sort of traffic issues that are a result of the odd intersection between Big Woodward and essentially all the streets, but especially the north-south ones. On the west, we recommend reconfiguring streets and creating public space to improve traffic movement and safety, to provide a sort of southern terminus to the set of downtown districts, rather than the sort of petering out that occurs currently, and to make the South Old Woodward properties viable for development. I'll come back for some of these recommendations, but I did want to point out this, which is an illustration in the document. The intersection issues at present are obvious. It's one of the most dangerous intersections that I've seen, the Woodward and South Old Woodward. The recommended reconfiguration here makes the left turn safe. And yes, we know a Michigan left is not what Chris drew, even though we bugged him a few times in this, so we'll correct that. But you know, currently you have the left turn onto Old Woodward from Big Woodward, and you know, it's quite dangerous. So, you know, we can make that safe with a turnaround just a little further north, but also improve safety of vehicles entering to Big Woodward from South Old Woodward at a perpendicular, and also the realignment of Adams traffic onto Haynes. The odd offset of Haynes and George Street is really convenient here, and it frames nicely a public square, which would then define the future character of the area, much like how Campus Martius on the southern end of Woodward defines that area. Clearly not as intense as Campus Martius, but the idea of a square, of a public square, really creating the identity for a district within the city. But successful commercial properties in the area is also impacted by their exclusion from the Birmingham parking district. So One of the issues that we found is that the properties along Southwood Woodward down here are quite shallow because they're backing up against the neighborhood, and that makes it difficult to accommodate the parking necessary while outside of the parking district. So here, by realigning these streets, we've suggested that portions of Old Woodward, basically south of George Street, be abandoned and sold to the adjacent properties, allowing those sites to be developed because they'd have more room for surface parking behind the buildings. Now, to do so, that requires the dispensation of city property for future private development, which is something that you don't do currently. But the work to allow this to happen in this area is worthwhile for the outcomes. So we've discussed reconfiguring.
Matt, I've got a question for Mr. Williams.
Yeah, the one thing you didn't comment on, which is an equally dangerous thing to Adams, is the closing off of Southwold Woodward at George, because and in particular, there's one aspect, and I've had a couple of calls already to point out that cars traveling south on Big Woodward don't know to get over to Old Woodward to be able to make a right on Lincoln. And right now, the sign says no right turn from Big Woodward. About every 5 minutes, somebody violates that law. And in particular, when they don't violate it, they go 1 or 2 blocks south, and then they cut through the neighborhood. So the residents of Ruffner and Humphrey, for those who don't know the names, the one before and after the CVS and Pet People stores, those neighborhoods, which have very narrow streets, get a lot of cut-through traffic from people trying to go west on Lincoln who don't know you can't make a right on Lincoln from Big Woodward. So I think that's another added benefit of eliminating a dangerous intersection and also reducing traffic in the neighborhoods. That's it.
Yeah, I think I've made that illegal turn before myself, so I know exactly what you're talking about. So in addition to what's been mentioned, other recommendations in the master plan have to do with the Triangle District and the difficulties that you have in the area to spark new development. Now, I did mention that we suggested that it not be an expectation that all new development within this district have commercial to ground floor. There's really quite a lot already around, and the city is really in need of a higher intensity residential district to support the downtown areas. And so this is an opportunity for that. It's an opportunity for missing middle housing. Yet again, we run into the issue of being outside of the Birmingham parking district. And so a lot of the recommendations are already in place for a small parking structure adjacent to the pharmacy, for the creation of Worth Park, and the redevelopment of the streetscapes are things that are echoed in the master plan. Though we have added some additional focus on, first of all, the streetscapes, which are in poor condition in the area now. You know, it's no wonder you don't encourage a lot of new business growth, given the narrow sidewalks and sort of blank walls that you walk by and such. So there's a lot of work in the streetscapes that are needed, but we had also identified the opportunity of Worth Street to be a shared space street rather than, say, a typical street as has been planned in the past. And that could create a new character to encourage some development here. Other things that we have are really related to the signage and landscaping and branding that we've mentioned in the past, and on-street parking that's metered on Adam and Lincoln. And the sort of last piece, which is kind of outside of the image, is you know, the other elephant, which is the Haynes Square shopping center. And even if that doesn't look to redevelop anytime soon, there should be some recommendations or some standards in place that sort of encourage the way that that is modified in the future. And I think I see a hand up again, so we'll take a pause.
Yeah, Matt, I wanted to comment that the previous owner of the south end of the Adams Square Shopping Center passed away. And I'm told that the estate or the heirs have sold. So the board may recall years ago when we were looking at the triangle plan that there was a possible inclusion of Adams Square in the concept of the triangle plan. That owner objected and we backed away from it. But now there has been a transfer of ownership. I don't have any details, but perhaps Jana can look into this. If we're going to study this area, I think in light of the new ownership, we should revisit Adams Square.
Hopefully that's a great opportunity, especially because the surrounding neighborhood is sort of the most clearly deficient in public open space. And so, ideally there's a way to provide for redevelopment intensity beyond what, would be expected given current zoning in exchange for public open space, perhaps the ability to have public parking, these other sorts of things that are missing in the area.
Okay.
And then just other pedestrian walkway improvements. I only have a couple slides for this. Do you want me to go through everything, Scott, or?
I think so. Just well, Mr. Kozik, did you have a comment? Could we unmute Mr. Kozik?
Hang in there. I can't seem to find him. Here we go. He's not muted.
There we go.
So I don't know how the protocol for what we're doing here, but just a quick comment and then a question. So I think this is the old Woodward Haynes Square. I think this is absolutely brilliant. Who owns old Woodward? Is that the city of Birmingham, not MDOT?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
Well, it is. The property line runs somewhere down the middle of that empty triangular piece of property south of 555.
Okay. And I know some earlier iterations, maybe not of this, but maybe the triangle district plan showed the connection Worth Street up to Bowers. And so Bowers, if you look at all the streets north of Bowers, that single family residential has its own sort of character. Bowers feels more, this is not necessarily a good thing, but feels more like everything that happens to the south. Has the fire station's probably not going away, but there's a big piece of land to be developed along Bowers Street. There had been a proposal there at one time. Why not have a vehicular connection? So that becomes part of the district to the south. And if for whatever reason that's impossible, why wouldn't there be a strong pedestrian connection to the park? It just seems like we're turning our back on Bauer Street. So speak to that. And then I'm trying to understand the jog at Adams. Is there and Haynes, is that a traffic light there? Is it a bombing thing? Is it, can a 55-foot truck do that? So speak to that.
Sure. And actually that connection north of Worth essentially to Bowers makes a lot of sense. So I appreciate the recommendation. I completely support that. Be it pedestrian or vehicular, it may not be necessary to be vehicular, though it's helpful, I think, in connecting to the district. So, I think that's a great suggestion. In terms of Adams at Haynes, the idea there is to essentially take the southbound movement of Adams and turn it onto Haynes, so that you're not continuing southbound on Adams to Lincoln and to Woodward, but instead that you're coming out on Haynes to Big Woodward. So you're sort of pushing that traffic there. And, we all know the southbound traffic on Adams can get pretty busy. And so that's really to try to alleviate that whole intersection of Lincoln and Woodward and Adams. On the northbound, it's also to sort of discourage that through traffic. Now, what this doesn't have is a piece about that sort of fast right turn onto Adams from Big Woodward north, which also needs to be remedied. So the jog is really about mainly discouraging the southbound traffic from continuing down and then sort of stacking up at Big Woodward for.
And I don't know how detailed you get into traffic studies and things like that. As somebody who drives that quite often, at least in the morning, it seems like, for every 10 cars, 9 are trying to get on southbound Woodward and probably heading south to Detroit or Royal Oak or somewhere. I don't see them making a turn onto Haynes. So.
Well, the goal there is that Haynes, if you're intersecting Big Woodward more perpendicular, it's easier to sort of make that left light be safe. So that's what the goal is. It's sort of you're getting them to Big Woodward faster by going down Haynes and skipping the whole Lincoln intersection.
All right. Well, that would be good. It does back up, obviously, and again, a peculiar sort of that's a pretty scary merging from Adams onto Big Woodward, and my neck doesn't bend around enough to see if somebody's coming southbound on Big Woodward. So anything that can be done to alleviate that, and then I'd be really curious how Haynes Square might figure into it's right at the midpoint of not necessarily their entry, but onto their property. So it'd be interesting to see how that might play out.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, Scott, if you wanted me to go on.
Yeah, Matt, I think I would like you to continue. I would like to try and get this to the public sooner than later.
Sure.
So, questions are good, but we can reserve conversation for the board level till later. So please go ahead.
Sure. So for the South Woodward Gateway, like the multimodal plan and other city studies, the gateway has already been studied in depth in the past. So for this plan, we reviewed the existing study and we make recommendations for either integration into the master plan or some modifications to further integrate portions of the prior study into the master plan. So we've discussed in the last times or a number of times the traffic speed on Woodward, and the Southern Gateway is particularly dangerous due to the frequency of parking lot entries near street intersections. So we've all gone in and out of those parking lots and know how dangerous that is. But it's also generally unsightly the way that the parking is located near to Old Woodward, which the Southern Gateway plan pays particular attention to. But it's also extremely dangerous to pedestrians. So not only the drivers, but walking along South Woodward is not a pleasant experience. And we were surprised to hear early on some people say that they walked in the alley. And then we got into the Gateway plan and really liked the ideas that were being presented there about providing an alternate route. And for bikes, I really hope and don't think that anyone would attempt to bike there. So the area needs help, but it's a bit stuck due to existing regulations, the character and speed of Woodward, the size of the properties and fragmented ownership. So to make real change requires a lot of work, no matter what you do. So one of the ideas that we adopted from the prior plan is making the alleys pedestrian and bike-oriented places. So like I said, we were skeptical at first. Then we heard from residents who said they often walk in the alley and imagine it could be quite nice. When we did the charrette, we stayed on the east side and walked through the alley quite a number of times and along the street frontages. And we agree with this idea. One day it may be possible to improve Woodward, but that's going to take a lot of time and money. It's worth it, but it's going to take a long time. But the alleys really could be great places. But to get this done requires both public and private initiative. And the private sector is not likely to move without the city actively piloting the first segment of alley. In considering this change, we're also concerned with the homes whose side properties are along the alley. So to improve this relationship, we suggested that the triangular parking areas be converted into shallow townhome units, or you might call them muse units. There's a few existing housing units in the city that are kind of this format near the northern Old Woodward. But the idea here is that the remaining triangular piece, and most of them aren't fully used all the time for parking, could be yards for those homes. So you have yards facing yards, because if you do have more activity within the alleys, then you need some buffer from the existing homes. So that would buffer the noise and light and face yards to yards. So the existing Southern Gateway plan, aside from the alleys, focused really entirely on beautifying Woodward. And these recommendations hold true for the current condition, but we found another opportunity that we think should be pursued, which is this idea of the neighborhood sleeve. So the sleeve is depicted here on the top, and the little portion on the bottom right. It focuses businesses on the streets that are perpendicular to Woodward rather than along Woodward. That creates a better relationship to the neighborhood, a space that is more intimate, so retail can be more successful, and consolidates the parking more efficiently in the mid-block, rather than a long strip of retail and parking that looks like most of Woodward does south of 14 Mile. The results, about 6 to 8 little neighborhood-scaled commercial nodes on either side of the street. To get there, it takes work and money in coordination with private property owners. So it would take a long time, but master plans are really about a long-term outcome. But this outcome would be a really serious improvement for the city. And I dined out recently in the middle of the street here in in temporary outdoor seating, but in a node like this here in Portland, which was the end of a street hitting a larger street that had businesses sort of focused on it. And it was quite nice. And we walked from the neighborhood, from a friend's house, into it. So to start this, there's some businesses that can already be readily adapted to the orientation. At Benneville, there's a business facing the side street alley already, and we had noticed this when we were in town last year. We'd also note that there's some design recommendations from the Southern Gateway Plan that are applicable, like the chicanes, these ways that the Southern Gateway Plan looked at reducing or slowing any traffic that's coming from Woodward into the neighborhoods. So, the recommendations here are to establish a district to incentivize this. There's a series of standards here that denote what would be in that district, including some requirements, some reduction for parking, some permitting of multifamily housing, in addition, in coordination in a mixed use sort of environment. And then the second is really to find a way to pilot it, which is, what we said, that the public sector needs to sort of lead the private sector along here. So that could include striping on-street parking on the side streets, adding some of the chicanes that were recommended in the Southern Gateway Plan, and revising the streetscape, actually building out an alley. So that's the Southern Gateway. And so again, there's a lot of things that are great in the existing plan, and we sort of build from that, but look at a way to reorient the businesses to relate more to the side streets than to Woodward, which is still going to be speedy for a while. So in the rail district, like the Southern Gateway, there's already a plan for the rail district that was written in '99. Some portions have been enacted, generally north of Palmer Street. And we considered the current condition of the lower rail district. Currently, it has significant planned capacity. So there's a ton of existing capacity for growth in downtown and the Triangle District. And the rail district has a lot of capacity in zoning today. But filling up both the downtown and Triangle, and then also the rail district, we don't anticipate that for quite some time. Maybe 20 years. But if you follow the standards in place, what's existing there, which we feel is of value, really isn't allowed. You can't really reconstruct that. But it's home to some really beloved businesses, and it's a pretty cool place today. So a portion of its sort of lack of current vitality, particularly along Lincoln, may be due in part to standards that expect too much of what the district will be too soon. So for a period of time here, we recommend that relief be provided from the high standards that are in place now to allow the district to evolve with what it's already been attracting today, businesses that are needed in the community and that have different allowances than what you could build in downtown or the Triangle District. So while also not listed here, we found there's a lot of parking capacity along Lincoln and at the ice rink. So additionally, that area should be allowed to function as consolidated parking for the district rather than relying on the oddly shaped parcels and small individual properties that currently would have a very hard time supplying their parking capacity. So here we recommend an overlay district that implements some zoning adjustments, ones that are discussed, and allows it to be a little more lenient for a period of time. So as an overlay, you can operate that for a decade or two and then remove it. We recommend that Cole and Commerce streets have a shared use street section. It's kind of almost there already, just from its current state. So, why not just sort of, why not learn from those cues? It could be really, really great. And then there are some things that we recommend, even in the current zoning district from the 99 corridor plan, that there are a number of standards for this area that we think need to be modified. Some of the frontage and sidewalk requirements, some of the signage, landscaping requirements, and so forth. So there's a series of recommendations to those standards. That's in the short term, and then in the long term, the rail district far in the future. Now let's remember that the current master plan is from 1980, so these plans are around for a long time. Sometime into the future, the rail district may play a more prominent role in the city, particularly with access to the transit center, to make way for, the future that was envisioned by the 99 plan. A few actions are needed now and policy changes, which require more further study. First, of course, is access to the transit center. Once the train anchored downtown Birmingham, but it was moved to make way for the superhighway, which I always love looking at that earlier 20s plan where they're talking about the superhighway. And while it's a long time off, rail still continues to be anticipated as an important means of transportation in the future. And it'll benefit places like Royal Oak, but at the moment we'll skip over Birmingham if there's not access to the station in the future. Now the city's attempted to procure access. It just needs to be done one way or another. So we really need to make that connection. But beyond that connection, there's careful attention that needs to be paid to the MX district standards. In our read, there are some clear issues, but the remaining standards need to be studied based on the existing fractured property ownership. Additionally, like the Triangle District, private enterprise is unlikely to build structured parking here, due in part to the small and oddly shaped parcels. So the city should study options for public parking, including some options that may be available at the Public Works site, which is smack dab in the middle of the district. We're not making a recommendation for what those options could be. We have some ideas, but it's something that we feel should be studied to lead the way for development. So that's what I have for these. You want me to leave the slides up, Scott, or?
Why don't we bring them down for now? We can always go back as needed, okay?
Sound good.
Thank you, Matt. Any questions quickly before I go to the public? We'll bring it back to the board, I'm sure, for robust discussion. Excellent. So let me open up comments now to those members of the public that are here. Again, please use the raise your hand feature, the bottom center of your console, if you have any comments related to Haynes Square, South Woodward Gateway, or the Rail District? And I am not seeing any comments. Jana, am I missing anything?
No, I'm not seeing any hands up either.
Okay. Well, we'll give it a minute here, but okay, let's bring it back to the board. Maybe we'll go back later, depending on our mood. Board, I know we've had a few comments earlier. Let's dive in. Is there anyone that wants to kick off with any additional comments related to what Matt has presented here tonight? No, Mr. Williams.
Well, I would say that I agree with Bert that in particular, the Haynes Square concept of first closing off south Old Woodward further north is a good idea. Moving the commercial closer to Big Woodward in the area currently occupied by South Old Woodward is a good idea. Improving the intersections of Adams and Lincoln and Woodward is really important. And I think we've learned through time that particularly those buildings, the closer they get to Lincoln, the more inaccessible they get because of traffic jams. So I like the concept of Haynes Square. I'm not sure whether we've got the right street intersections to the north identified, but I think it is a worthwhile objective, and I think it highlights the point I made several meetings ago that we need to be able to convey, sell, otherwise move publicly owned property, which is the area of the Triangle District, and we're prohibited from doing it at the present time from a sale. So I know in the past the city commission has looked at this issue and really backed away from it, but I think in particular that rechanging of the intersection and frankly making it easier to get across Woodward at that location for pedestrians and bicyclists is a worthwhile objective. And secondly, I would say that improvements to the Triangle District is something that we need to look at. It's not directly part of this, except at the southern end. It points out the need for a parking structure so that we can increase development. And I think the potential of, and I say potential, possibly of revisiting Adams Square is also a worthwhile objective. That's really my primary comment. I think on the South Woodward Gateway, which I've been talking about for 13 years, more or less, I'm not sure about the concept of different type of housing on the other side of the alley, both to the west and to the east. But I do think the concept of changing the configuration of buildings and getting rid of the parking in front of the buildings along Big Woodward is also a worthwhile objective. It's dangerous to get out to Woodward, and in all these cases, I think both with Haynes Square and the South Woodward Gateway, eliminating the vehicular problems is a worthwhile objective in both of them, and also to making parking easier and making it more understandable for pedestrians. Particularly, I know that whenever you try to pull into a commercial building in the South Woodward area, and you're typically pulling into one of those little areas in front of the building, you're immediately crossing in front of the street. People are coming east and west out of the street. There's an opportunity for collisions, let alone for bicyclists and pedestrians. So I like the concept. I'm not sure further east and further west, the type of housing that's depicted here is going to be well received by the residents. But I think moving the buildings closer to Big Woodward and eliminating the parking problems is a significant plus. That's it.
Well, I'll point out that the housing proposal is essentially where there's already been parking lots that have, the next parcel's been purchased and you've got those triangular parking lots.
Yeah.
So, maybe it's a housing type or something, but you probably need something if you're going to activate that alley to buffer.
Yeah, I think, Matt, the one thing I've commented on over the years, and you saw it in the charrettes, was the areas to the west and to the east of the alleys on both sides of the South Woodward Gateway area are, I'll use a word that I think everybody will understand, pretty crappy. And the buffer between the alley and the neighborhoods is non-existent, or it's just terrible, and the maintenance is even worse. So we need to do something and I totally agree with your thought there. We need to do something to separate the commercial from the residential without intruding into the residential area. And I've been saying that for a long time. So whether it's housing or it's evergreens or whatever it is, it's got to be better than what it is now. And I do like your idea of pushing the buildings to correspond to the streets and getting the parking away from a big Woodward. I think that's got to be the objective. And frankly, if you look at the area between virtually Big Beaver all the way to 8 Mile, that's what you've got. It's just a sea of 8+ miles because it's a diagonal, but that's all you've got.
Yeah, except for Ferndale, which we discussed. We said, how do they get their speed down? But yeah.
Well, you'd have to dig into historical, political stuff that someday they'll write about us, but it'll be 60 years from now and we won't care much. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? Mr. Jeffries.
Okay. I was going to make a comment about the parking. I think, Brian, you maybe were having a preference for this mid-block, which was suggested. I think another consideration is having it all on the Woodward side. To me, if the more of and I think the multifamily, which isn't any taller than all the new houses are, the 3-story houses that they're building on 40-foot lots anyway. But if you've got more of a stretch of it, I can hear Woodward from my house clearly, and I'm 7 blocks from it. If you could put up multifamily, which is more adept to living, in that kind of situation, I think it would give it would knock that sound down quite a bit. It's my opinion. The transit center, I think I couldn't agree more on that, Matt. That thing is the biggest joke. If you've ever tried to take the train, they've literally made it so that you can't even use the station, because by the time the train is coming, they tell you it's coming, you don't have enough time to get up and over and down. And then so you have to go over there in advance and wait. And you're then just stuck in a concrete stairwell. It is a $2.3 or $2.6 million albatross. And if we could get property on this side by whatever means necessary, we could make get a great plus for Birmingham and make that better for everybody. Matt, on the shared street, I guess one of my, I think we should look for places where we can do that. I really wish we could find a place in downtown. If anything we've learned out of this pandemic is having some streets with some limited car traffic and having more people out has been a huge plus for many.
I will remind you, we did recommend Merrill for that in downtown.
Oh, is that in there?
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, that would be great. In fact, I was just last week sitting there with my wife, and she asked the question unprovoked and said, God, why don't they just close this thing down? It'd be perfect. So yeah, great. And if there's other places, I'm not in favor necessarily of limiting the sidewalks in the rail district. I know what you're kind of going for, but if we look at our city slogan, I'm not sure it's unless we have so many streets closed down and so many shared streets. I just wonder on shared streets where I've seen them in Europe, you've got enough foot traffic that the cars don't have this huge upper hand. And I wonder with the amount of that we would have there, nobody would ever trust that it's shared. And last point, one other comment on this multifamily along Woodward, on the other side of the alley, is my experience in real estate is that a significant portion south of Lincoln of those lots, those houses that are right next to the alley are rental houses. And in fact, a lot of them are owned by the businesses that are in front of them in the off chance that they can never get them rezoned or whatever. And then I know some other folks that do have it, and that's the only use. Nobody, you take a haircut on the price, but they can get decent rental price from them. So that's my comments.
Okay. Ms. Boyce, could we unmute Janelle, please? Oh. Could we unmute her, please? We had it, then we lost it. There we go.
We good? Can you hear me?
Yes, please.
So Haynes' proposal, I'm super impressed with. I'm really excited about the ideas and the way you could come into Old Woodward, slow traffic, change some patterns. It's really exciting and more than I'd ever hoped for. As far as the South Woodward goes, a couple things I'm also excited about, of course, are the townhomes that you're proposing along the alleyway. I'm really impressed with the attention that you paid to the adjacent neighborhoods and how those townhomes with the green space behind them would be such a relief to the single family residents behind it. How wonderful it would be to get rid of the surface parking lots that are back there and turn those spaces into green space with townhouses right next to it. I think it might be advantageous if, for example, on page 218, where you have these sort of diagrams, like block diagrams of what you're proposing, the triangle spaces that are directly between the townhomes and the single family residences are colored in white right now. But it's my understanding from your presentation that you would propose that would be lawn or green space that would directly abut to the single family homes green space. And I think that would be beneficial for the presentation if those were colored in green, unless you have a reason for not doing that. No, okay.
Just for everyone's benefit, I'll just share that really quick so we know which diagrams Janelle was talking about. That's here. That this triangle here is actually intended to be green.
And that would be such a plus for the people who live there to have that there. And so I think it would be important to emphasize that. And then lastly, I just wanted to say, reading the proposed recommendations for the rail district, it was funny. I kept thinking about Robin, frankly. So many of the suggestions, the recommendations are things that Robin's been saying for years about how the rail is so different and quirky and how we need to relax a little bit over there, not be so stringent, allow it to develop more organically. And everyone said about the connection to the train train station. So overall, really good. Very impressed.
And
Excellent.
you reminded me, and I just wanted to point out that there's an intention in terms of the sort of where you're relaxed and where you're more strict, and the Haynes Square was is also intended to sort of be an in between. You know, like you're the most strict in the Maple and Woodward core of downtown, and the least in the rail, and really the sort of triangle / Haynes Square could be somewhere in between.
Okay, we're going to go Mr. Boyle first, and then we'll come back to Mr. Scheer and Mr. Kozak. Mr. Boyle.
Yes, I want to thank Matt for keeping us going and giving us a reminder of what has already gone into this, and I think it's part of our job to keep the momentum going, and I would like, if I could, just to focus a little bit more on what we're now calling Haynes Square. I would call Triangle South, but whatever the term is, and I would like to, if I can use a sort of a colloquial term, kick up the conversation a bit and really focus on what we've got here, which is a piece of property that has a lot of wasted land. It has huge amounts of parking space, asphalt, and roads that don't go anywhere, and alleys that don't work, and truthfully, buildings that are slowly being recognized that don't work, but slowly. Is there some way that we can take this planning opportunity, this plan, to kick up the action, if you can, for this particular area? And we can discuss what it's called. To do what? Well, we know that you've told us in our plan, and we've responded to what you've said, that one thing we've got to do is to try and extend our housing options in the city. But we know how hard that's going to be. We do know. We're built out largely. So when you've got a built out situation, you've got to go and focus on what opportunities do exist. And one of them is the Lower Triangle District or the Haynes Square area. So let's focus on that, and let's talk about it as a way in which we might be able to get the missing middle. Much as I appreciate the comments about the South Woodward area having a possibility for, quote, townhouses, when I hear the word townhouse, I shudder. And you know why? Because townhouses that we build in Birmingham are well beyond the pockets of many, many households that we want into Birmingham now and into the future. We need therefore volume, and we need a price point of housing that is beginning to look affordable and or attainable. Why don't we focus that around the lower triangle Haynes area? Second point, I think there's a danger of a contradiction that we're going into. Let me just get to it. And I don't think you meant to contradict yourself, but 1 minute we talked about MXD or mixed use and getting cars and things moving around in there, with always cars, by the way, and residents. I think we've got to be careful here what we want out of this area, but it seems to me the opportunity exists going ahead over the next decade and more to have more people there, people living there. And accordingly, we need to plan for that. So I would pick up the themes that my colleagues have made and talk about something like a controlled vehicle area. It's happening all over the world. I wouldn't jump immediately to shared space, because the curbless shared space of many parts of the world are have evolved over centuries. We need something that actually controls the cars, and they're doing that in big cities. Just today, there was an announcement from the mayor of Barcelona to extend their pedestrian islands, as they call them. And I think that's something that we can learn from, and it's happening in smaller places as well. So we can begin to focus on what's the use that we want in the lower triangle or Haynes area. What use do we look for, and how do we move people through that area in a safe and convenient way, with more parks, more planting, more pedestrian, wider sidewalks, cycleways or whatever, and not focus only on the car. Now, I'm not being critical of you or my colleagues when all we talked about was shifting cars along Woodward and Adams and all the rest of it. That's all well and good. But I think our plan needs to be about what we want for these areas. and I want to, and I'm focusing here on the lower triangle. You can tell I like that term more than Haynes Square, but so I'll keep repeating it till I burn that. Last point, and I'm not sure that it's going to be in the plan, but I'd like to put it on the record that we need to think about how we're going to achieve this. And the plan needs to have somewhere in it the whole question of how do we drive this? What are going to be the mechanisms and the drivers for achieving what we're talking about here? We haven't really talked about it. We initially said, well, the tax increment zone and we've got a parking deck built on that. Well, that's failed. It has. So I'm urging us collectively to think about whether it's in the Haynes area or even back over in the rail district that really didn't get that leadership either. It didn't. The downtown has leadership. We know who the leaders are in downtown. We do. Even the upper end of Old Woodward, you can identify the family. They were here last meeting. We can identify the developer who put the money into Brookside. I mean, we know that it's happening there. We know that it's happening and has happened in downtown and also with development and money coming in from Chicago and elsewhere. It's great. Well, I think it's great. Others might not. But we don't have that in the rail district, and we certainly don't have it in a triangle. So I'd like us all to think about how we want to achieve this what I think is an opportunity, and how we can move ahead in that direction. With that, I'll pass the baton over to who's next, Scott.
One thing on that I think is important though, Robin, which is we tried to first set up a discussion in the master plan about the mixed use areas, and that they should be, even including the core of downtown, that they need housing, they need to be 24 hours, and they need to be thought of as neighborhoods the way that we think of them, call them planning districts, whatever. But you need public space, you need safe streets, you need destinations, you need people there 24 hours. Now, when discussing this area tonight, I said that it's an opportunity for Birmingham to have a higher intensity residential area adjacent to its downtown. So, and you'll note that that a lot of cities, in most cities, the neighborhoods adjacent to their downtowns are at a higher intensity. Now, you get that a little bit currently to the southwest, but you don't really have the sort of the adjacent walk-ups and 4 or 5 story multifamily buildings that you really need to support a downtown 24 hours.
Fair point. I'm with you, and I did hear you, and I do hear you. I just want to make sure that we keep talking in that way. I'm with you.
Yeah, I was trying to keep talking with you.
Thank you. I know that we had Mr. Scheer, your hand was up.
Yeah. Couple of things. First, I think on the south gateway, I think it's really important in whatever way we restructure the businesses fronting on Big Woodward to avoid traffic pulling into parking for those businesses across the side streets. Those are really, I do it quite a bit because there's a dry cleaner that I approach from the north, and it crosses a side street, and it's sometimes just terrifying as to whether or not how the traffic reads my right turn signal. If you signal for the cars behind you to let them know you're going to be slowing down, but the car at the intersection might think that you're going to turn onto the side street instead of cutting across into the little parking lot. So I think that's an important safety feature, and to the extent that we can align the parking with the traffic not coming across that cross street, I think that's really critical. Secondly, across on the east side of Big Woodward is the are those business frontages deep enough to construct the kinds of models you were showing us, Matt? I kind of have the sense that it's not as deep on the east side as it is on the west side.
Oh, well, it depends. I think on the west side you have a few more conditions where the triangles, bigger triangles, have been purchased on the west side than the east side. But the depth of the properties is similar. We actually modeled both of those and did the calculations on them.
That's because you're used to going to the pancake house.
Had to get the pancake house in, Mr. James. Mr. Scher, did you have anything else to add?
And then on, I guess, some comments about Haynes Square. I think if we can do some things, I mean, the thing that strikes me is when you head on Bauer Street, on the north side, there's a football field or more of asphalt between, behind the old Baker Square and the fire station. So if there's some way to, cut down, that and the great big giant parking lot behind Walgreens and some other places, I think that would be good. And I think Robin's comment kind of strikes a chord with me that we probably need to back up a little bit. And if I remember that correctly, there was some thought that, we might need or have room for, so to speak, in terms of market presence, a couple of thousand units in the residential units that people could afford who, make whatever it was 150% of median area. I forget the exact metric. And so the question then becomes, where do we get them? And some of them are going to come in the core downtown, Market North and Maple Woodward. Some of them are projected to come along the seams. Some can come in the Market Square east of Woodward. And I know that the seams have generated a lot of controversy in town. And I'm thinking maybe what we want to be doing is thinking or quantifying a little bit more about what the capabilities are for these different possibilities, so that we have some sense of, could we put, or how many could go in the core downtown, how many might go in the Triangle District, how many might go in seams, and sort of work through with those numbers and get a sense of, do we need all of these options, or do we optimize the city with just some of them? And then just another question for you, Matt. I'm having trouble visioning what the south end of the rail district looks like with this relaxed, let it be more organic.
Sure.
Well,
Go ahead.
So if you could kind of help me out with some words or drawings or something.
Yeah, I'll get back to the housing in the Southern Triangle just to describe that. Essentially, what's going on now. You have all sorts of businesses that don't really fit in the downtown that have landed there and have done well. But the expectation is that any new development would be multi-story and would be subject to some pretty stringent requirements. So along Lincoln, a lot of those it's really not very active. There's a lot of empty space there, but you can't redevelop those properties at one story, right? Currently. And that's an issue because the market just isn't there yet for the area to go multi-story. And so the goal really in relaxing is not to be all that different from what's going on pretty successfully right now. I'm just taking a scan, and it's mainly on Cole, which is the most active. But like you have the yoga spot and the co-working space, and of course further up on Eaton, the robot garage and such. But it's mainly an issue of two things. One, the market not being there in that place for it to intensify to the level that the code is anticipating or requiring, and and two, just recognizing that the things that are there are useful. So it's not that much different than what it is now, just with full storefronts. Maybe some better, more aligned signage, some better use of the outdoor spaces than just surface parking lots. So kind of like a now plus just a little bit cleaned up.
Okay, all right, I got it, thanks.
For the other piece, though, I think it's you bring up a good point about housing infill and where that can go, and the missing middle and so forth, and the opportunity to fit into the Southern Triangle is really strong. Now, it was clearly brought up that the parking hasn't been built yet, and that's holding things back. And maybe the sort of issues along with the that the seams bring up should drive more focus on getting that parking built, so that more of that housing demand can be absorbed in an area like this. But I will note that it's most likely not going to sort of fit the full range of missing middle housing. It's surely going to be more focused in multifamily, just given the zoning that the zoning entitlements that's already been given, right? There's
one, just one hypothetical, and I don't know what the full range of facts are that, if instead of having seams in TZ1, TZ2, and TZ3, and with a fairly high density in one of those, so you might just keep it in one or two of them with the lower densities. So there's some ways to mix and match, and I guess it's just a question of tailoring what our goal is, what our resources is, and what the community reaction is, and what makes sense. We don't have to do everything, we just have to do enough.
Right.
Yep.
All right, Mr. Kozik, you had your hand up, and then I'd like to get a word in if I could. So please go ahead.
Okay, so just so Haynes Square, as I mentioned, I absolutely love it. It's an opportunity to make some landmark buildings. I wonder logistically how you'll ever accomplish it, because if I own those buildings and they currently front on Woodward, and you're gonna sell a piece of land in front of me, and so good luck with that. If I shift all the way to the rail district, I really like, we have this odd hammerhead. Hammerheads are not good, right? Good planning. Cole Street ends kind of dumbly into whatever. So I do like the bend at the hammerhead along the parallel to the tracks, and there are three buildings I'm familiar with on the east side of that now have frontage, as opposed to sort of the only way you can sort of access them now, I think, is from Cole Street and in a sort of a bizarre way. So I think that's a really good thing. And then lastly, and maybe this is a detail, but maybe it's something that's written as part of the narrative, I look at the park in the Triangle District, and it's a sliver. Is that something that might be developed at some point, as opposed to a green space with roads on three sides? Is that a piazza that goes building frontage to building frontage? It'll feel 3 times as big, and it's a different sort of an experience that we have in Birmingham. And so maybe that's not a master plan thing, but I know things get depicted in drawings, and sometimes
Robin's comment brought that idea up to me as well. Do you need streets on all sides of it?
Right.
It could be attached. It could be a piazza. Yeah. So there's
right.
Yep.
Thinking of the meatpacking district in New York or something. I mean, it's all just sort of cool, feels big and important. And so those are my comments.
Excellent. Well, I want to jump in quickly, and I'm going to hit a couple of things really quickly, because I do want to get back to a conversation that Mr. Boyle started and Mr. Scheer fanned a bit. So real quickly, in the rail district, general support for where you're going. I do think that it's important that we prioritize some solution related to shared or consolidated parking, because the current surface parking lot, the current coverage of impervious surface is just, quite frankly, disgusting to me. And we need to, as quirky and as organic, it can still be better than that. The Southern Woodward Gateway, I really do appreciate some of the ideas you have. The devil is clearly in the details, as Mr. Boyle said, that the housing, what is it? I mean, clearly you're talking low density. You should be very clear about what that means. But I agree with the general concept. The only thing I would say with regard to South Old Woodward Gateway would be, you've got two different parking scenarios that I believe were in the first draft. One was the tray, I think you called it, as Mr. Jeffrey said, was his preference all along Woodward. And then the sleeve, if my memory serves, where it was center in the middle. Just for the record, I am very, very, very much in favor of the sleeve. And in fact, I think the tray is, due respect, a horrific idea. And I would just assume that not even be in the plan as an option, because it really just, to me, turns its back on Woodward completely. And I think the sleeve is a much more elegant, if done right, much more elegant way to handle it. But also, in addition to keeping that odd, keeping away from that odd crossing of traffic if you're trying to get into those front parking spaces on the side streets, it also, I think, is going to discourage people leaving those businesses from going on the side streets, because they're already going to be right on Woodward. Not have that moment of doubt. Should I just turn right, go down Benneville or what have you to get out of the fray? So I think it could help the residents in that regard. But really, I want to get back to Haynes Square, or I think as Mr. Boyle wants to call it, low try, or maybe so try. I don't know. I've heard a couple of things tonight. I am very, very excited about the general ideas for this district and how you're trying to flip access between downtown and the Triangle from Bowers to Haynes. I think it's a really good idea in a lot of ways. I wish I thought of it myself, quite frankly. But I want to pick up on Mr. Boyle's comment and Mr. Shears as well. The more and more I thought about this, the more and more I have to admit that depending again on Mr. Shears' great comment related to the sort of capacity we might be able to eloquently and comfortably manage in our different areas, I look at the seams as the lowest of priorities in my mind for any sort of residential expansion. And I'm just speaking personally. To me, if the Southern Triangle District could become, with the exception of Haynes Street itself, could become almost exclusively mid-rise multifamily residential, I think we've hit a home run. And I would like to suggest that our priority in any sort of managed growth or adding absorption should be, in order, the downtown and the Southern Triangle, with perhaps the rail a distant third. There are probably factors there I'm not thinking of that might make that far more difficult. But to me, we should prioritize our look for the missing middle in the Southern Triangle, or whatever we're going to call it. And I would even go so far as that, I know Mr. Boyle likes the Southern Triangle. Maybe we want to rip that whole thing up, because the northern part of the triangle really never fit, in my mind, with the southern part. It's single-family residential. It's established. There are chicanes and other things along the streets on Elm, because they're at times had been inundated with traffic. Maybe we want to leave that well enough alone and focus on how we build out a more dense residential area to the south, and really focus our energy there. I think it's important for us to try and not extend downtown or compete with it, which I think goes a little bit more toward my idea of perhaps focusing more on the residential and providing a complement to that downtown experience. Only other comment would be the Adams Haynes situation. I live just north of this neighborhood. I'm not in the North Triangle. I'm over in the villas. I'm on this road I was on this road every single day when we were living outside of our homes. There's got to be some more thought given to that entire connection and how it all works, because that is it's an interesting solution, but it needs a little bit more work for how we maintain access and do all these things. But I'm intrigued by the idea, so please don't be discouraged by that. But I'm curious, Mr. Boyle, Mr. Scheer, anybody else, your thoughts on focusing residential absorption in this area? Am I off base? Am I barking up the wrong tree and somewhat forgetting the seams or potentially reducing the impact of those seams? Mr. Williams.
Yeah, Robin said focus on what needs to be done short term. I think those are my words for what he said. I mean, I think the area, at least on the west side of Big Woodward in the triangular area, we got too many triangles. In the triangular area south of 555 between there and Lincoln, it's publicly owned property. And I think this whole area is not going to work unless we can figure out what to do with that triangular piece of land and move development from where it is now further to the east to Big Woodward, which means the city doesn't have the capacity right now to sell or dispose of property it owns. That's got to be changed. Now, that was a major hurdle on North Bates, and I'm not suggesting we go that route because now all of a sudden we'll hit a new home run for volume on next door. But I am suggesting that this whole area, the narrowing in effect of trying to cross Big Woodward in this area, the south end of South Old Woodward it has to move north, and that area, including the road and the triangular area, somehow we need to develop. But the first step has got to be to change our ordinances or to develop a master plan, which begs the question of allowing the city to dispose of that land. In whatever form you want, whether it's middle income or upper income or lower income, you can't get to any of those until you change the ordinance and the ability of the city to deal with that property. The one benefit that this has is it doesn't encroach on any neighborhoods. It only encroaches, in Robin's words, on those big ugly cars racing up and down Woodward. So that's the first step to me, is giving the city the ability to deal with this. And I have to say, I've lived in Birmingham for a long, long time. I don't think I've ever, except in Dream Cruise, see anybody use that triangular area park other than to take their dog illegally and do stuff. But it's a wasted piece of property, frankly.
Ms. Boyce. We could unmute her, please. There you go, Ms. Boyce.
Yep. I like what you're suggesting, Scott, with this tri area on the east side. The higher sort of capacity of residential, the more affordable housing options, and the way that might activate that area. But I did have a question about what you said, Scott. As far as, are you still in favor of maintaining the proposal of unifying the east and west across from Woodward along Haynes Square the way they're recommending? Because I'm really excited about that.
Oh, I'm excited about it too. I didn't mean to imply otherwise. No. I just, because the southern part of downtown, if you want to call it, that's outside of the parking assessment district, is very different than the area north of Brown, as we've learned firsthand a number of times. So no, I'm very excited about that connection. But what I'm saying is we're trying not to create another Maple and Woodward at Haynes and Adams.
I totally agree with you then. I think that's really an exciting way to go about this, and gives us a good opportunity of a place to focus on, per your suggestion, of the east side of Woodward after that connection is what you're suggesting might be a really good place. The southern triangle piece might be a really good place to start to look to do something like that. So yes, I like it. Thanks for clearing it up.
Any other comments?
Well, we didn't bring it up, but of course it's been discussed before, that segment of Elm that comes down between Bowers and Haynes, and vehicularly it's a problem. I don't know if that is something that should be considered in the sort of abandonment towards something else, or or in pedestrianizing. That's also another way to look at it. But those vertical, the few of those that exist, Worth and Elm. We already talked about Adams. It's worth considering. Maybe a couple different fates for those.
Yeah. Fair enough. Any other comments at the board level? Seeing as we did not get any comments from the public earlier on, it is still somewhat early this evening. I'm going to take the risk of going out to the public one more time. I think we ought to see if they have anything to say about what they've heard tonight. We've had a very robust discussion. So again, I will open this up to the public one second time. Oops. Forgive me, I got so excited I pulled the headphone off. I will open it up to the public one more time. If you would like to comment, please use the raise your hand function. I do see two hands up, so let me start. Mr. Reagan, could we please unmute Mr. Reagan?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm interested in the discussion that you've had about the area south of the 555. As we've looked at opportunities to unite the city that are residentially oriented and actually make sense for who we are, I've proposed on a number of occasions, I don't know if you've heard me speak on the need for a bridge uniting both the east and west sides. That area south of the 555 could be a landing point, if you will, for the bridge if one were to entertain it. But if you open your imaginations for a moment, I've not merely suggested a bridge. It's a series of pathways that if you have the spine of the path running up the center, the median of Woodward, and then have the spokes coming off of it at various points, you can actually begin to integrate the city. And the objectives then become integrate what? And I'm not merely, prior discussions were, well, we'll link a parking deck in the triangle to something on the west side. No, that's not correct. That's not the vision. If you're linking east and west, it has to be where people are, where they're going, where they live. For the people who actually live here. Don't think commercial, think residential, and think perhaps walkable or perhaps even a light electrical vehicle. But that land south of the 555 is an opportunity. It's not just something to jam more commercial or, just retrofit some stuff in on some sort of second thought. That's very limited thinking. And I would invite you to entertain the idea of using that as one of the spokes. What are we linking when we are thinking east and west? Right now, we're a divided city. The city's property values on the east side are, in my view, depressed relative to those of the west side. That could easily be changed.
Great. Oh, did we lose Mr.? Oh,
no,
oh, you're still there. Thank you, Mr. Reagan. I appreciate it very much. Other comments? I see Mr. Bloom. Could we please unmute Mr. Bloom?
Hello, good evening, everyone. David Bloom. I live in Birmingham. Thank you for giving people the opportunity to speak. I think Mr. Reagan's comments were actually really cool and thinking a little bit out of the box and looking at how we can do better for all of Birmingham. I think it's a fabulous idea to at least look at it. I also appreciate from some of the planning board members comments about the seams. It's an issue that keeps on coming up, and it is It is a controversial one. I, for one, have not been in favor of it. There are a lot of others that aren't as well, and I appreciate the recognition in terms of the priority and that there is controversy regarding that. In terms of looking at housing stock and what we need, I don't think it would be inappropriate to look at different areas and figure out or understand what could be put there. Now, that doesn't mean that we should put it there, but at least there can be a discussion on numbers and facts and figures. In terms of prioritizing, I think doing something in the Triangle District makes quite a bit more sense than some of the other areas that have been talked about, the downtown and the Triangle District. But for me, I'm not in favor of it, but in terms of more seam development, but at least understanding the housing stock. The other thing is when there's a comment about how much housing we need, I'm not sure. There was a line in the original master plan first draft about how much housing we need, and I questioned where that came from, and it came from some government report. And the real question is, what are we here for? What is the planning board here for? What is the city commission here for? Are we here for the benefit of the residents of Birmingham that have already invested here and trying to plan for a sustainable community for our current residents and what's needed to have a good Birmingham? Or are we here to satisfy some outside demand of people that have not yet invested in Birmingham? And I think we ought to take a look at what are the priorities. Are we planning so we could bring more people to Birmingham? Do the people living here now want more people here? I mean, these are things we need to think about and choices that we need to make, rather than from on high having some pronouncement, we need so many more housing units, so we're going to start cramming them in. I think that's really a discussion as to what kind of community we want to be before we go further down that road. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bloom. Appreciate your comments. Matt, I will say that it might be worth, to Mr. Bloom's point, a future discussion about that residential absorption and the managed growth that we've been discussing, to explain a little bit, and not tonight, but explain a little bit not only the source but also what the concern would be. To address whether the desire for that absorption is simply to grow, or if the desire is to manage what could be adverse effects to certain aspects of property values or other goals. I think it's important that that's spelled out to Mr. Bloom's point, so that the residents, as they look at this, can understand what the intent of the plan might be.
Yeah, I think that'll help to frame the discussion, and why we said we really need to have 2 meetings on.
Yeah, I think it's a great point.
We do that.
I'm going to go lastly. Is there anybody else in the public that has any comments? One last chance. I do not see anybody raising their hand. All right. Okay, so we'll bring it back. Last time around the board, and then I think we'll call it a night. Mr. Jeffries.
Just to pick up what you guys were just talking about. I don't have any factual knowledge on this, but I'm sure Matt has access to this. I've always felt, the data came from SEMCOG or whatever, and saying, okay, if this Oakland County is going to grow so much or whatever, then what's everybody's share, right? I think it's not a big stretch to say, okay, if it's going to grow and towns like Birmingham are more attractive than perhaps bedroom communities like a Bloomfield Township kind of thing, at least they are now, we might, get more people who want to live here. And maybe more knowledge on that. The other that I always get concerned with is as we have more demands or more ability to not walk into a retail store in our town because of there's online opportunities or whatever else. Does growing the population a little bit, allow us to have more of this foot traffic, where now the most convenient thing for me to do is go to your store versus do it online, or drive, look for a parking spot and go to your store. And so I always wonder what is the function of maybe some of this a little bit more density and putting some houses where we don't, some housing where we don't have it, like in the lower rail or lower triangle, that would help us support that kind of business. Because I mean, I think people take it for granted that, oh, we got these stores and they'll always be here, but you got to have people go into them.
Yeah, a 24-hour downtown is a different animal, and right now the shopping district is oriented a certain way, and we're all unsure of how many of those types of businesses will survive and what will it look like. But if there are opportunities to provide for people who are living there, then there's essentially a built-in convenience. That's one thing. The other thing I think is important to think about in this as well, as we talk about the Triangle District, is that the U.S. is massively over-retailed, and that's one issue in talking about that as an opportunity to absorb a lot of housing and not try to focus on so much growth of commercial over there, because rebalancing is important. So I think that'll change. I don't remember all the square footages offhand, but it's somewhere like 6 square feet per person is a more reasonable standard, and we're somewhere around 15 or something like that. But I think it's important that the sort of which businesses are where, and the Woodward's had a hard time maintaining restaurants at especially a more attainable price point. In part because there's not the evening time trade that you need to support that, except for people who sort of go out of their way.
Great. Any final closing comments from the board? Mr. Williams.
Yeah, I think following up on that point, I come back to Robin's point several meetings ago, which was how are we going to deal with the post-COVID world? I think at some point we're going to have to come back to Maple and Woodward. I happen to, as a retailer on Woodward, and his chief complaint when the lockdown was ended was there's nobody downtown during the day. There's nobody living downtown during the day, and the biggest problem the retailers have right now, is during the day when they're open, there's nobody at the stores. And part of the problem is we have all this commercial space downtown on top of the retail space, and we have very little reasonably priced residential downtown. And that post-COVID could be a long-term disaster for the retailers that we have currently, let alone expanded. So I think when we get to that point, we've got to revisit this. And to really get to Robin's point, we got to try to deal. This thing isn't going to be done until sometime mid-2021 at the earliest. And by then, we have to have a handle on where we think commercial is going and residential is going. And that's the biggest problem we have downtown. I think maybe it was a good idea in 1996 to have 3/4 of it be commercial and 1/4 residential, if that much. But I think those priorities may be wrong for tomorrow's world. And they're certainly wrong for today's retail world that we have downtown.
All right, Mr. Chair, last word, and then we'll move along.
I want to go back to something that you said at the very beginning, Mr. Chairman, and that is what's one of the basic purposes of a master plan is to guide land use decisions. And classically, what communities do is they say, well, what do we want more of? What do we want less of? What do we want to rebalance? If we have junkyards on 8 Mile, do we want to have fewer of them, or do we want to move them to 9 Mile or whatever? And if we kind of go back to that and put that into the framework of some of the discussion that we had, I think that, as Matt said, I think long-term retail square footage in the society is going to drop. Doesn't mean it's necessarily going to drop in Birmingham, but even before COVID, we were seeing excess capacity on the south end of downtown. I think everybody seems to agree that long-term per square foot office usage per worker is likely to drop. And what is it that we're, what is it that we have? Well, we have a tremendous retail base. We got a fabulous office base. Those may long-term be declining. We have a lot of pressure for people who want to move here. We neither, I can see, neither want nor have pressure for industrial, whether it's light or heavy. And so the question then becomes, with the demand that we have, where do we put the residential? How much do we want to encourage? How much do we want to limit? Where do we want to put it? And that I think is our big challenge. So I guess that's a long-winded way of saying, let's keep it in that context and think about it in that way as we have the next couple of meetings to talk about residential.
All right, Mr. Boyle, you get the last word just because you have a giraffe sitting next to you.
No, I don't need the last word. I just want to reply to Mr. Bloom and thank him for raising the issue, because for the next couple of meetings, we are going to have to discuss that. And I would urge him to look at page 15 of the first draft of this master plan that we're discussing. Vision number 3 is about continuing the success of Birmingham. And number 1 on that list is the success of the Birmingham schools. I urge him to go and contact the school board and find out the demographics of the school district and see what the numbers are telling us. Not supposition or ideas, but what the numbers are telling us. That's point number 1. Point number 2 is there's a house across the street on sale where I live. It's on sale for $1.8 million. If a household wants to buy that house, you can be absolutely sure that they can send their kid to a private school. If you wanted to continue the success of Birmingham, we need to have a strong school district. So let's have that discussion when we're discussing housing and the seams and all the good stuff that's going to come.
All right, let's move along. Thank you, board, for robust discussion. And Matt, thank you for joining us and for all the hard work. Appreciate it.
Yes, indeed.
Well done.
Great.
Let's move along. We've got communications. Jana, anything else?
I just want to,
et cetera?
No, there's just an update on the virtual meetings in case anybody was wondering. Yeah. As you know, with this, the state legislature changed the rules, so we are allowed to do virtual meetings through the end of January, or it's through the end of this year, 2020. And then after that, there are other things that have to be in place if we are going to continue to allow everyone to meet virtually. So just keep in mind that the December meeting will definitely be virtual. And after that, we'll be playing it by ear to see what happens and if the legislature changes things or whether the city takes some action. We don't know, but we know we can be virtual through the end of the year. So I just wanted to update everyone on that.
Right. Great. What is our agenda for December 9th, which, board, if you remember, I think we switched to a regular meeting where we will be doing site plans.
Yes, that's correct. And the first item on is Fruition. It's a food and drink establishment proposed at 856 North Old Woodward. It's a special land use permit. Second on is Tappers. They are a gold and silver jewelry exchange that is proposed in the Merrillwood building on the second floor, also a special land use permit. So it's up to you whether you want to put the next item on, which is 219 Elm, which would be a final site plan. Generally, the board's desire was to limit the virtual meetings to 3 items. While those are 3 items, the 2 special land use permits count as 2 each. So I do need to know if you want to leave 219 Elm on or not.
219 Elm, I'm
all seasons.
All seasons.
All seasons
2.
phase 2.
Phase 2.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, we do not have any more meetings this year outside of December 9th.
Correct.
Board, do we want to indulge and bring our sleeping bag and just get her done?
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of thumbs up. So,
Okay, thank you. I'll do the noticing then accordingly for all three.
okay,
Thank you.
great. Any other business, board? Jana, anything else from you?
Nope.
Well, thank you all very much. I appreciate this. Was a great discussion. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody. Happy Thanksgiving to the public who joined us and who's watching. Thank you again for all your comments, and this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thanks, Scott.
Good night, everyone.